You found the skeleton. How would you tell people that? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Hey there YouTube, the Dapper Dinosaur here. First, before we continue, I want to read a correction from Dr. Tapioca Weasel, who is in fact a PhD physicist. Quote, electrons do have an intrinsic dipole moment even at rest as a consequence of their spin. The magnetic moment of an electron is one Bohr magneton, and it's actually a pretty reasonable simplification to say that electrons are like little bar magnets. It's how I describe the energy levels of an atom, chance-based on an external magnetic field. When the electron's magnetic moment is aligned with the external field, the energy is lower than when the same electron's dipole is anti-aligned to that field. The interaction between the electron's magnetic moment and the magnetic moment associated with its orbital motion around the nucleus causes fine structure splitting. This is the effect responsible for tuning splitting and absorption/fluorescence line of sodium near 589 nanometers into two distinct lines very close together. This is also called LS coupling, where L is the quantum number of the orbital angular momentum, S, P, and D, atomic states you learned in chemistry for L, 0, 1, and 2 respectively, and S, this is a different S, is the spin of the electron. These two are combined in the total electronic angular momentum with quantum number J equals S plus L. Additionally, the nucleus can have a magnetic moment as a consequence of 1. The magnetic moments of the neutrons and protons, both of which have spin and magnetic moments, even the neutron because it is comprised of quarks, and 2. The orbital angular momentum of the nucleons moving about in the nucleus. The total magnetic moment of the nucleus, quantum number I, interacts with the total electronic angular momentum J to produce the hyperfine splitting on top of the fine structure splitting. Using lasers and radio frequency microwave fields to manipulate which arrangements of angular momentum within the atom is like 90% of the physics that I, that is Dr. Tapioca Weasel, do as an atomic physicist. Finally, at long last, my extremely narrow expertise lets me to correct a thing that Dapper said. I have waited literal years for this. I can now die happy. End quote. Hope that clarifies from last time. Last time we were here, we heard that Roger had determined that electrons are gluons, neutrinos are the same as their non-neutrino-associated leptons, and that everything else is basically made up of muons and electrons in various combinations. That, of course, is completely and obviously wrong, but that's Roger for you. I bet he's the kind that would look at the moon. Anyway, here's Roger.
That is some form of a tau neutrino, and that would be extremely heavy.
Actually, no, tau neutrinos are lighter than electrons. In fact, they're less massive than all but 2 of the leptons, the other neutrinos. They're also less massive than top quarks, strange quarks, and both W and Z bosons, which, is a problem if they're supposed to be composed of Z and W bosons.
As a particle, the two together and one white would be a very heavy particle compared to the 2 and 2. Well, when I say heavy, it would be...
Okay. Now it kind of makes sense. Roger doesn't have any idea what mass is, so of course he ignores it in all of this. Because if he doesn't understand it, then it must not be important.
Alright, these are the neutrinos. This is light coming in.
Light is made of photons, not neutrinos.
And light forms the neutrinos.
Again, no, one of the most fundamental things about neutrinos is that they do not interact with the electromagnetic force.
Now this is probably a tau neutrino.
I counter with, it's probably a compression artifact.
I'm not sure.
That's probably the least surprising thing Roger has said so far.
But then you have the straight up and down ones. There's a different form of neutrino.
And it never occurs to Roger that all of these exact 90-degree angles are a bit odd. Does he think that there's some kind of objective correct orientation for the universe? Is he claiming that neutrinos are polarized and that Rod from Australia has a lens that can filter neutrinos by polarization, but that it filters the polarization of different neutrinos differently? I'm so confused as to how he's reaching these conclusions without giving them even 10 seconds of critical thought.
What I believe is dumb.
And you have the photon.
Which again, all curiously have 90-degree rotations from each other. Almost like we're looking at something other than real objects captured by the camera, which remember, can't actually capture parts of photons, not just because photons don't have parts, but fundamentally the way the camera works is by capturing photons. And in the case of digital cameras, like in Rod from Australia's cell phone, they use the photoelectric effect to turn whole captured photons into brightness information. And hey, maybe it's time to talk about the photoelectric effect. Might as well make this more educational. The photoelectric effect is what Einstein actually got his Nobel Prize for. For centuries, the wave nature of light was well established, which is why in the early 20th century people were looking for the ether wind, assuming that if light was a wave, it needed a medium to be a wave in. As a wave, light had a wavelength and frequency and amplitude. Now amplitude is just how much energy is in a wave, and in light it corresponds to brightness, and in invisible light both frequency and wavelength correspond to hue. Now it was noticed that light waves could produce an electric charge when striking metal by essentially knocking electrons off the metal. But the way it did so was confusing. You see, if light is a wave, then amplitude, or brightness, should determine how much energy is transferred to the electrons, and so whether or not electrons are knocked off the metal in question should relate strongly to amplitude, and not really to wavelength at all. But that's not what was happening. With long wavelength light, you can shine the brightest beam you want and not a single electron will be freed. But the faintest imaginable short wavelength light will knock off electrons fairly easily. Einstein realized that if light came in little particle packets with an energy that corresponded to the wavelength, and the amplitude is simply the number of such packets in the beam, then this paradox is resolved. Only packets of energy that are of sufficient magnitude are enough to knock off an electron. No amount of packets that are individually too low energy to do so will ever manage to free an electron. But even one packet of energy that's big enough can do so. This neatly resolves the problem of the photoelectric effect, but also means that now light, and as we later learn, many more things, can't simply be treated as a wave or a particle. They are fundamentally both, and that realization is what kicked off the revolution that is particle physics.
Now, the reason these are showing up here and they're not like this or like this is because they're not directly in the path of the Venturi crusher.
Remember that by Venturi crusher, he just means tube with a narrow bit. Sure, would be cool to get some actual methods, like, what is the wavelength of this laser? What's the power level of it? What are the measurements of this Venturi? How far is the laser from the tube, and the camera from the tube? What camera is being used? What are its optical properties? What controls were taken, etc. But no, we have a picture with some artifacts on it, and so we're off to the races.
But look at what happens here. Look at these up and down lines. This is like not letting the white get back out. It's forcing it in, creating this big black line here that forces those particles to squirt through. That's what I'm seeing.
Okay, but Roger also sees genitalia when he looks at rocks.
That, my friends, is a vagina.
I'm seeing artifacts that I have no reason to think represent anything that exists outside of the camera.
And we're seeing all kinds of different neutrino flavors. They're all over the place. So this is why this universality didn't work. They're seeing them all over the place, and they say, that's not right. If you're saying this weighs this, this, and this, and then I'm seeing them all over here, it's not working. Well, that's why.
So neutrino flavor universality has to do with which neutron flavors are produced during W boson decay. How does Roger know that the neutrinos he thinks he's seeing were produced by W boson decay? Is he under the impression that the laser shoots out W bosons? Lasers don't do that. So even if Roger were somehow correct that these camera artifacts are somehow the camera capturing images of macroscopic neutrinos, it would have nothing to do with neutrino flavor universality.
And obviously, I hope you understand, every one of these is going to have a different energy value because it's being concussed in a different way.
So the neutrinos are knocking into each other. Okay, so it would take about a light-year thick wall of lead to give a neutrino a 50% chance of being stopped. Neutrinos do not interact with each other in any way that's significant enough that just a beam of them from Rod from Australia's place would show evidence of neutrino-neutrino interactions. And of course, this is ignoring the fact that lasers just don't shoot out neutrinos. They shoot out photons.
That's why these are like an Oreo cookie, and these are straight up and down, and then these are big, huge, long lines.
Yeah, I'm sure this has nothing to do with the fact that pixel grids are laid out on a square grid with right angles. That's just a coincidence.
Setting up patterns that end up forcing these to separate and squirt that white, completely just the white. I think that is as energetic as you can possibly get.
I'm glad that Roger is energized by things squirting white stuff at him. I hope he gets as much white stuff squirted at him as he wants. Good for him.
All right, these are the 4 things physicists still wonder about the Higgs boson. I think I've shown it pretty clearly what it is.
Boy, was I wrong.
They say the collision could produce
The feather was bad enough. The finger is so much worse.
dark matter particles. And it does. It separates the dark matter from the white matter, really, the energetic matter. The dark matter is gravity, and it's all of the mass almost.
Except that, remember, Roger thinks that W bosons are the so-called white matter and have almost as much mass as the Z bosons, which he thinks are dark matter.
What I believe is dumb.
And it pushes the white particles ahead of it. So let's watch that in the house bomb, and that'll show you that the white particles are light, and they are Bernie particles.
Thank you.
And the other part of them is also light because they are one as they are light.
I think that was Deepak Chopra levels of silliness right there.
All right, you see this? It says the Higgs could be just hiding in plain sight. It says they predict the dark matter interacts with normal matter by swapping the Higgs bosons. Yes, it does.
Citation? I made it up. Good to know Roger is so confident in the standard model that he thinks its predictions about dark matter are true, but he also thinks it's completely wrong. Weird stance to take.
The collision could produce dark matter. And it does, and I'll show you that.
You heard it here first, folks. Roger from Mud Fossil U is the first human to directly detect dark matter. This should be good, and it definitely will not be scribbles on paper that make no sense.
Is the Higgs connected to dark matter or other unusual particles? Higgs is nothing more than particles coming together, and you can witness them coming together.
So not even crazy scribbles? Wow. What a letdown.
It says the Higgs boson helps explain where mass comes from. Many scientists think it should interact with dark matter. It's partially dark matter.
No, the Higgs boson is not dark matter. The Higgs boson is not a persistent thing that can exist in clouds or halos like we see with dark matter. Dark matter is almost certainly going to have to be made of fermions.
The mysterious substance seems to be connected with everyday matter. It's everywhere. This got dark matter in it. Everything has dark matter in it.
I'm going to need a citation for that, because it seems like what Roger thinks dark matter is just anything with mass. But since he also doesn't know what mass is, it makes it hard to figure out what he really means.
Because it's attached to the white matter, which is the electron, basically. And the dark matter just attaches to it. It's the other side of Dirac neutrino.
Ah yes, word salad, but with physics words, that explains it. The mystery of dark matter has been solved by just mashing up concepts in incoherent ways by the man who thinks that rocks are meat.
So anyway, they say that you could create dark matter from these energetic interactions, and we did this. They know that, they see this, they just don't understand it.
Ah, the rich irony of Roger of all people accusing actual experts of not understanding their own field. As a reminder, this is the man who couldn't tell if Mystery Flesh Pit National Park was real or not.
See, they see any additional Higgs that we may discover would indicate that there must be new physics. And everybody knows there's new physics now. It's just that they just can't get off of the standard model. It does not work.
Except that Roger himself actually already played a video from CERN showing just how well it does work. And they actually produce data with actual measurements that can be checked by other teams using recreations of the CERN experiments. Now, we know that the standard model isn't all there is to the universe, but to say that it just doesn't work because it's incomplete is asinine.
Everything is a dipole.
It's really not, though. Like, conclusively.
And that is right there exactly how molecules are formed. And even protons. A proton has a dark core, and it has all the little electrons, the glowy parts, trying to get away from each other. And they surround the dark core. And that was what a proton is. That's why nobody's ever seen a dark core. Nobody's ever seen dark matter. Can't get to it.
I love that we're almost an hour into this video, and at no point has Roger even tried to explain the fact that positive charge exists. You'd think that if you have a new model for particle physics that will solve all the problems with the standard model, that you'd, I don't know, have a way to explain how positive charges work. It's a rather important aspect of physics. Heck, Roger's computer wouldn't work unless positively charged particles existed.
This would be a ball of white particles surrounding it. Never going to see it.
I wonder if Roger thinks that that white stuff will ever be squirted at him.
We saw it because we broke everything into little bitty pieces and we could see the dark and the white parts attached. That's the difference.
Using the advanced technology of a crappy cell phone camera with a tube and a narrow bit. Much science, very convincing. Wow.
Okay, so once again, I'm sorry, Nikola was not right. The electrons have a mass.
You know, at this point, I kind of forgot that Nikola Tesla was involved in this at all.
But they contain the dark matter. They are those Dirac neutrinos. I'm sure I showed it to you. I always finish this up with the atom central house explosion here.
Ah yes, because nothing will showcase the dipole nature of electrons like shock waves in the Earth's atmosphere.
Now, watch this. This is from Atom Central. Very good people, atomcentral.com. And this is the bomb. Now, it's going off. What we are just seeing is the white particles and not the black particles.
Or, hear me out, since atomic bombs have two stages, both of them explosive, with the second stage being much more energetic, you're getting the shock wave from the first explosion, then a much more intense shock wave from the second explosion. Because while Roger might not realize this, explosions displace air, and air has mass, and so air molecules have momentum. Way more momentum than, say, a bunch of W bosons are likely to have. But it is good to know that Roger's fantasies have progressed from white stuff being squirted at him to it flooding over him in an unstoppable tide.
All right, you see that? Let's go back here and look at this in slow motion. All right, I'm going to come down here, and we're going to go playback 25%. Okay, here goes.
How to use YouTube with Roger.
I'm going to let it go. The first thing that's going to happen is the white particles hit.
That's dust.
The house just burns up. There's no mass to them.
If there were no mass involved, it probably wouldn't be blowing particulate matter off the house. But it is. Because again, we're watching air blowing against the house.
But they are energetic as hell. Now comes the black, which is all the mass. And boom, away it goes. All right, so...
Again, this is just the more intense shock wave from the actual nuclear part of the explosion.
What does that prove? It proves there's two separate entities here. One of them burns and has no mass. One of them doesn't burn and has all the mass.
No, I think it proves that, like all fluids, air can be displaced.
And here they are right here. I'm going to explain to you precisely what an atomic bomb is and why we get this exact effect.
Oh good, Roger is now smarter than the whole Manhattan Project.
No, it's just so saturated with particles around the outside of the black core. And here's the black core. Nobody sees it. Nobody knows it's there because it's way inside. All right, well, this would be a cap that would be over all of this. It would all be totally surrounded by white particles. When that explodes, and it's so saturated, they want to leave anyway. They concuss it this way, and then it comes out, and all the white particles goes first, as we saw, and they hit the house, and then the black particles come after. Let's watch one more time, so you can't possibly miss this. It's impossible to miss. Watch. Just keep your eye on it. I'm not going to say a word. That's pretty obvious.
I thought it was a photon. That's what it was last time.
This is an atomic bomb.
So atomic bombs work by inducing fission, and fission is the breakup of nuclei into smaller nuclei, not the breakup of photons into electrons and muons, which isn't really a thing that photons can normally do anyway. It's still amazing to me how badly Roger can understand relatively simple concepts.
And you see everything burn. Nothing moves. There's no mass to these white particles.
Then what moved all that dust? Seems like there was mass because, again, we're watching shock waves in air, not streams of subatomic particles.
There's virtually no mass at all. And that's exactly what Fermilab says. If you look up what's the point, well, hold on a second. I think I have it on my desktop here. Yes, what's the point? There's the two particles that I'm showing. The black one is in the center. These glowy ones surround it. That's all.
Ah yes, back to Roger refusing to actually read his source. It's been a while. So I'll remind everyone that this is not describing two different fundamental particles, like Roger thinks, but describing the difference between point-like fundamental particles with spatially extensive composite particles such as protons and neutrons.
And when it explodes, all of these leave first because they're the outside. They're the crust. And that burns the house. They have no mass. Exactly what he says. Listen to this. This is Don Lincoln from Fermilab. They understand exactly what this is. Extended particles, the black ones.
Come on, man. What the extended particles are is explained in the second paragraph. I quote, "The quarks, leptons, and bosons of the Standard Model are point-like particles. Every other subatomic particle you've heard of is an extended particle. The most familiar are the protons and neutrons that make up the nucleus of an atom, but there are many others: pions, kaons, lambda particles, omegas, and lots more. The defining feature of these kinds of particles is that they have a reasonably measurable size, which happens to be about the size of a proton." So Roger is just cherry-picking here, which is deeply dishonest.
Have a fixed size. There's just one big bowling ball. Point-like particles are mathematical abstractions with zero size. Now, I can't go with zero, but I can't say they have a size to them of any magnitude.
Fun fact, a property with no magnitude has a value of 0. That's rather what 0 is. If your bank account has no magnitude of money in it, you have 0 money.
But their zero-sized particles have extended effect due to the field surrounding them. Well, if something surrounds something, I would think there's something in the middle of it, but I don't know what is there.
In this case, it's the peak of the wave function that describes the probable location and velocity of a given particle if it be observed. It's not a physical thing. It's like even Roger read, a mathematical abstraction.
It's very, very small. It didn't move the house. It just burnt it.
It moved all that dust and dirt, though, and I didn't actually see any evidence of the house being burned, so that's weird.
It's just like he says, exactly what they say here.
Only if by exactly we mean not at all.
I do not discount this whatsoever. I discount the fact that the Standard Model, that is no good. It does not work at all.
I don't discount this conclusion reached on the basis of the Standard Model, but I do discount the Standard Model on which it is based. Yeah, that makes lots of sense.
The Standard Model is not successful because it doesn't account for these dipole particles.
In order to say that a model must account for something, you have to show that that something actually exists to be accounted for. And remember, literally the only reason Roger has given to suggest that these dipole neutrinos exist are crappy pictures from Rod from Australia's cell phone, and him being incapable of understanding a picture from Fermilab. That's it. Unless you count him not knowing what air is when looking at atomic bomb test footage.
They see them, they just don't know what they see. Don sees them right here. You see this? He sees, that's the dipole. That is the one I'm telling you is a Dirac neutrino attached together.
The information telling us that no, that's not what's being pictured here is right on screen, and it's linked in the description. And guess what? Either Roger has a severe reading disorder, which he seems not to, since in some cases he can read words just fine, or he's actively choosing to ignore the words that are actually explaining the diagram he likes so much. I would count the latter as dishonesty. Let me know in the comments if you agree with that assessment. I'd love to have reasons to think that Roger isn't lying to me and his many fans.
We split them when we did our Venturi effect.
He really didn't, though, and he wasn't involved. Remember, it was Rod from Australia.
Now, I also agree with Fermilab about the quantum foam, which is this. It says empty space isn't empty. The space is not empty. It's loaded with this quantum foam, which is the light particles that I showed you. And they are the Diracs.
So close and yet so far. The quantum foam is compared to the foam that makes up the head of a beer. The bubbles are constantly forming, collapsing, combining, and splitting. Similarly, myriad virtual particles of all kinds are appearing and disappearing in what we would normally think of as empty space, and this has measurable effects. Perhaps the most famous is the Casimir effect, in which by excluding a significant fraction of virtual particles from the space between two plates, this creates a pressure that tends to clamp the two plates shut. Virtual particles are not all just electrons, which seems to be what Roger thinks.
See, this is again my friend Don Lincoln.
I have trouble thinking that Don Lincoln thinks of Roger as a friend, although I wouldn't be too surprised if he is cordial towards Roger in correspondence. That's of course assuming that they have actually communicated. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they haven't and Roger is just inventing a friendly relationship between them.
Neutrinos, there's the Dirac. That's the things I'm showing you. They're attached together. Well, we were able to break them apart.
Except that's not what's shown, as we've already gone over. To come to that conclusion, one must completely ignore the entire text of the article.
And they talk about neutrino oscillations. I show every single thing that they have seen.
No, he's shown crappy JPEGs of a laser shining into a camera.
You see, this is why my model is correct. Listen to this. The neutrino is one of the most mysterious particles. This is right here in the standard model. The original idea of the neutrinos was formulated in response to a problem with the decay, in which a neutron, which is one of these particles supposed to be neutral.
I think we finally have our first acknowledgement by Roger that neutrons even exist, which is odd considering his idea of how isotopes work, which involves electrons and not neutrons, which led me to think that he doesn't believe in neutrons, but maybe he does? I wonder where he thinks they exist and what he thinks they do.
Converts into an electron and a proton. Well, all it is it's a whole batch of electrons. So it loses one electron and then it becomes charged into a proton.
Which violates the conservation of electrical charge. I really hope Roger gets into that.
When it had an even number, it was neutral. It was a neutron. That's the only reason.
So neutrons have an even number of electrons and protons have an odd number. What, do charges multiply instead of adding? Is that the idea? Wouldn't that leave protons being negatively charged and neutrinos positively charged? I'm really trying to make sense of this, but it's just so incredibly insane. None of it makes a lick of sense.
Then it says historically, the electron in this kind of decay has been called a beta particle. The problem was that energy seemed to disappear in the reaction. No, it just gave off an electron.
For f***'s sake, Roger, the electron is the non-mysterious part that has been long accounted for. The point of the neutrino is that the energy total between the new proton and the new electron isn't as much as it was in the neutron in the first place. So that energy has to go somewhere, and it's not in the electron, so how the hell do you f*** this up so thoroughly?
Either the principle of energy conservation had gone out the window or a non-interacting particle was emitted in the decay.
Yeah, the non-interacting part is really important because neutrinos barely interact at all with anything, whereas electrons, being electrically charged, are full of interactions. Very easy to detect ones, relatively speaking.
Pauli proposed a second solution in what he called a desperate remedy. He originally called it the neutron. No, all it is if there's an uneven number, it wants one more to become even, or it wants to give one up to become even.
He said on the basis of literally nothing, and not being bothered by the fact that the emitted electron is well accounted for, and the whole point of this article is to talk about the portion of the energy which is not.
If it's an even number, it doesn't want any more, and it doesn't want to give one up because it's stable. That's what neutral means. Charged means it either wants one more or to give one up.
Then why are electrons charged all on their lonesome? Riddle me that.
And when you see the number of isotopes, I'm amazed they just don't understand this. I need to talk to Don, but he won't talk to me.
Who could have predicted that the guy Roger calls his friend Don Lincoln doesn't even talk to him? Oh wait, it was me. I predicted it. Maybe if Roger had anything that was actually worth the time of a real physicist, he would talk to him.
All right, don't forget, I'm saying it's nothing more than a big ball of electrons, which are all dipoles. They're the Dirac neutrinos, just like Don Lincoln showed.
Which is like the actual opposite of what Roger's friend, who's never talked to him, Don Lincoln, showed.
And in big balls, they become stable at certain periods. However, they have all different variations. Look at this. This is lithium. This is only number 3 here. There's hydrogen, helium, lithium. So we don't have a whole lot of particles in lithium compared to some of the big ones. Look at the type of, this is all lithium. All of those are different types of lithium. Same lithium.
Right, the same atomic number, hence the same number of protons. It has nothing to do with electrons somehow glomming onto a muon in the nucleus. In part because leptons can't be affected by gluons, and gluons are what holds the nucleus together. So we're already deep into crazy fantasy land here.
But they're only stable here and stable here. All right, at these quantities, at these masses.
Right, and the difference is the number of neutrons, which again aren't leptons because again, no strong force interactions. And for the charged ones, electromagnetic force.
Everything else is unstable. They want to give off or take on extra particles.
Right, but the very chart on screen indicates that in many cases the particles are not electrons. They're whole protons or neutrinos. So this doesn't really work with the idea that they're somehow shedding electrons, which are just gluons, even though electrons interact with each other, but not with gluons, which makes this whole thing paradoxical if electrons are gluons, as Roger thinks, since that would mean that electrons both can and cannot interact with each other.
And look at all of these different ones, and all they are is a couple of extra particles or a couple missing.
Those particles being neutrons, let's remember.
That's why lithium is so powerful. It's got a ton of isotopic type of extra electrons that you can put into it.
I don't even know what he's trying to indicate with that. I recognize all the words, and as far as I can tell, the grammar was technically correct, but no actual thought was transmitted from his mind to mine. I think that there may not have actually been something that rises to the level of thought behind that utterance.
That's why lithium is very, very reactive.
And here I thought it was because it only had one electron in its valence shell, but apparently it's because it has a lot of isotopes, which is odd. Lithium has 14 known isotopes, only 2 of which are normally encountered in everyday life, but argon, which is far less reactive, has 27, nearly twice as many. Shouldn't argon be twice as reactive then? Instead, argon basically has no chemical activity at all. Weird, it's almost like chemical activity has more to do with valence electrons than it does with how many neutrons an atom has, which, is in line with what science says.
This is the smallest particle that exists of an atom, is a hydrogen. And there's all kinds of different hydrogens. There's protium, deuterium, tritium, those are hydrogen 1, 2, and 3. And then there's some other little bits and pieces here and there. All of these are different hydrogens. It's not just one hydrogen. And they weigh differently according to the electrons.
Nope, still the neutrinos.
How many extra electrons they have.
The table literally has the neutron number listed under the N column. It's right there, on screen, right in front of his eyes.
That's all it is a combination of electrons in bigger and bigger and bigger masses, and the black goes into the center, just like it shows in the space experiments. The black really wants to go away from the white.
The space experiments, eh? I wonder what those are.
The black would love to be all by itself. Look. You see that? That's in space. That's because you don't have gravity. What is gravity?
Gravity is the warping of space-time by massive objects, which at classical scales is measurable as an attractive force between massive objects proportional to the sum of their masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them.
They don't even know. This is what gravity is.
No, that's a void in dust particles suspended in a plasma in 0G by Russian cosmonauts in a low Earth orbit. Like, just check the video. It's linked in the description. And the name of it is up on Roger's screen. He could have actually paid attention.
It's dark matter.
Nope, it's not matter at all. It's literally a place where the dust isn't.
It's the other side of the dirac.
Nope, still just a place where there's no dust.
And in space, it can separate and create these black holes. They see them all over the place. They just can't explain them. Well, this is the explanation. The dark part will in ions.
This is the first I'm hearing of this. How much would you guys bet that Roger doesn't know that an ion is just an atom with more or fewer electrons than protons, making it on net electrically charged?
And in radiation that is incomplete.
Incomplete radiation, huh? Well, that's a new one on me. I have no idea what it would mean for radiation to be incomplete.
All right, where you just have some black and you just have some white. Because we know they can separate. There's no question about that.
See, for me, knowledge is justified true belief. I think for Roger, it's just whatever stuff he made up one day and decided sounded cool.
And when they're coming off the sun and all these extremely violent sources, they're being ripped to shreds. So you got blacks and whites and black whites and black whites and white black blacks and all kinds of things going. And they're just drifting through the universe. Now, sooner or later, they're going to start to collect. These, I think, will attract to themselves.
Places where dust suspended in plasma doesn't go will attract themselves. I don't know how, and I don't feel like Roger is about to tell us, nor do I feel like he's going to tell us why the absence of dust in a plasma is a black hole, and not, the absence of dust.
The black. And all the whites want to surround them.
I love that Roger looks at a video about dust, decides that dust is really neutrinos, which are actually gluons, which are electron neutrinos, and just runs with it. Who cares what the people who did the experiment say about it? This one still kind of looks like something his deluded mind came up with one day. So that's what it must be. Wait, did I say I love that? I think I mean I hate that. Whatever verb I should have used, I definitely have a strong reaction to it.
Right? They're extremely attractive to the white.
Weird then how it's literally a place without dust. If it's so attractive to the dust, because let's remember, we're looking at dust, not electron gluon neutrinos, then why isn't the dust at that point? Why is it all around it and away from it?
And I believe they're attractive to themselves. They don't mind being on top of each other.
That's what she said.
These guys want to push each other away. That's why they will always form around the outside. And then at some certain point, they become stable. All right? And at that point, when they're stable, more will want to come in and say, no, you can't come in. And they say, why not? And they say, we have enough. You have to stay. And they say, well, where do you want me to stay? Stay right there. Stay right there. That's where you are. You could stay with me and go everywhere I go, but you have to stay there.
Well, at least now we know how Roger thinks electrons ended up around nuclei. That's something.
Can I prove this? Absolutely.
Well, aside from the fact that nothing is proven in science, he's going to need a lot better evidence than lying about a Russian video and looking at blown-up JPEGs sent to him by Rod from Australia.
All right, this is really cool. This is Latham's Crazy Machines. And he's going to show how these magnets work exactly identical to the nucleus of an atom. He's going to construct this nucleus right here. Watch this. Don't forget, Latham's Crazy Machines. Here he goes. He's taking a brass ring and he's putting a core in the center, which is the positive core.
These magnets are dipoles, and so the core isn't positive or negative, it's both north and south. But the core magnets are inserted in the opposite polarity to the magnets in the ring. This sets up a net magnetic field which is more complicated than one would get from a collection of aligned magnets, which is what will be causing the various effects. Essentially, it means that on the plane defined by the ring, there will be a radius at which ferromagnetic objects can be held at a rest relative to the whole tractor magnet because of the balancing of magnetic fields between the core magnets and the ring magnets. But this is not how electric charges work, nor are many of the things Roger thinks works this way actually even affected by the electromagnetic force in the first place.
So for us, that's the black core. All right? Can you see this? Yes, you can. That is the black core.
Which, remember, according to Roger, is a muon, which has the same electrical charge as the electrons he thinks are surrounding it, all of which are electrical monopoles, not dipoles. So all of this is a bad analogy, even if he were actually right about what protons or nuclei are made of. It's not clear if he thinks this core with an electron shell is a proton or the whole nucleus, because he is too dumb to state his claim clearly or in a way that people can understand, who know even the amount about the subject that you learn in high school.
Now, he's putting several of the other style, the other polarity around it, just exactly what I'm showing you here.
Except that all the particles Roger is talking about are electrical monopoles.
And then he's going to show you how quantum works.
Hearing the phrase, he's going to show you how quantum works, is currently making my internal organs, especially my brain, leak out of my orifices.
So here it is. Now he's taking another particle with the opposite polarity. Boom, look at that. See that? It's exactly what I'm saying. These here surround that core. And then there'll be other ones that want to get in, and they cannot get in because these will push them away. They'll come up and they'll try to get in, just like he's showing, but they'll push them away because that one there sucks it in. Now let's see if I turn it around, if it'll push it away.
Poor Roger can't even reproduce his own ideas with his own toys. Feels bad, man.
I can't get this one to push away, but they will push away when, well, actually, one magnet might, if I could roll it into the right polarity.
This must be embarrassing, even by Roger's own standards.
I could feel it pushing away, but it wants to attract, so it jumps in. But he's doing it perfectly, watch. He can move it, it'll stay right in between those two little loops of, what's going on here is that has a magnetic field around it. This one has a magnetic field around it. It's hugged in between the two magnetic fields.
Wow, Roger actually got something right here. That is what's happening. He just hasn't demonstrated that it will work with electric dipoles. Or, that anything he's talking about is actually an electric dipole, especially since we already know they're electric monopoles.
It wants to get as close as it can. So there's really a magnetic field here and one right here. And that one's right in between. And it's jiggling itself right in there. And it's going to stay exactly in that location. And then there'll be another one that'll go right in between these two. And another one over here, and another one over here. And he shows all that stuff in this video. But he's going to move it around. It stays very tightly secure. Now, here's what he's doing. He's showing it bouncing. All right? It'll stay with it and it'll bounce. Basically, that's heat.
Wow, where was this level of analogy throughout the rest of the video? Setting aside the problem that electrons and protons aren't electric dipoles, that being heat actually tracks really well with his analogy. Roger should do more of this. It almost makes sense.
But in addition to that, the only reason it bounces is because there's somebody trying to take its place. So you're feeding more electrons in. That's what heat is when you force electrons in, trying to push that guy out of the way. Say, oh, get away from me. You get away from me. And they slap each other a few times and it gets hot.
God damn it. We were so close to making sense, and then he just threw it all away. Heat is just a measure of how much kinetic energy is in the particles that make up a system. It's not caused by an inrush of electrons onto a nucleus, although electrical currents certainly do lose energy to heat. But many other things can cause heat too, such as the capture of photons.
Right, and that's what heat is right there. Now, when it flies off, it's light, or it's electricity.
Apparently, Roger hasn't noticed that light and electricity aren't the same thing. I'm not sure how he's managed to become an adult in the modern world without noticing this, but there it is. I wonder if he thinks that bare conductors always glow. I wish they did, because I'd have been shocked fewer times if all I had to do to tell if a conductor were dead was to simply see if it were glowing.
Okay, that would be basically electricity. All right, now static. Light is when you have a couple of those electrons together and it's being spit out from an energetic source.
That would be an energetic source, but for the millionth time, photons don't have mass or charge, and electrons do. So no.
All right, light is always from an energetic source.
I mean, yeah, light is energy, so it has to come from something with energy, I guess.
Okay, I guess I'm going to leave it at this. I think I've shown enough to support the things I'm saying.
I think he does think that. Funny how no one who actually knows this field agrees.
And I think we can get free energy right there if what they're saying about the increased value of the energy is. I don't see where we can miss. We need help, and I cannot support it. No, I can't do it.
You know, Roger, when you say you can't get free energy by shooting a laser at a tube with a narrow bit, I believe you. Since no one can, because free energy is impossible. No matter how many JPEGs you look at. After this, he gives his email and asks people to contact him. I'm not including it because I don't actually think anyone in my audience should contact him via email. If you really need to, leave a polite but accurate comment on his YouTube videos. I don't see any reason to flood his inbox with emails that he won't read because it seems like he ignores anything that doesn't agree with him.
And that's just what happens in zero gravity when you have charged particles. And there's going to be nothing but charged particles in space.
Oh, so now he does know that it was a zero-G experiment. I don't even know how to parse this anymore.
They're going to be all over the place. Every single different type of lepton.
Half of which aren't charged, remember?
Baryon, hadron, neutrino.
Hadrons are those particles composed of quarks. Baryons are those with an odd number of valence quarks with a minimum of 3. None of this factors into Roger's ideas because he doesn't seem to think quarks even exist. So I have no idea how he would define such particles.
Gluon, quark, fermion.
Gluons are the force carrier for the strong force, which Roger thinks are just electrons. Even though gluons have no charge or mass, unlike electrons, and have integer spin, while electrons, being fermions, have half-integer spin. Which, by the way, is the definition of a fermion? Another on the list of words that Roger doesn't understand, but has heard and is now listing off.
Bosonic.
Bosons are the fundamental particles with integer spin, like gluons, photons, etc.
Anything you want, you're going to have them out there. And you're going to end up with them. Black ones connecting to each other and white ones surround them. It's just happening. And there's a whole new article that just came out today about black holes. NASA had a black hole in space.
NASA had a black hole in space. What, did they lose it? Did it escape the clutches of the evil NASA scientists?
Somewhere. Whatever it is. I got so much of this stuff.
Look at all those tabs. He must be doing some very high IQ research.
What do we got going here? I think this might be a... Oh, neutron stars.
Which are not black holes. So this is definitely not what he was looking for. Unless he just doesn't know the difference between neutron stars and black holes, which is entirely possible.
This is very simple to understand. A neutron star just means that all of the white particles that were on the outside have gotten scrubbed away, and all you have is dark matter left.
If neutron stars are made of dark matter, then why do they emit light? That's like the one big thing that dark matter doesn't do. That's the whole reason it's called dark matter.
And it collapses into the dark matter, and then that's all that's left. That's what a neutron star is.
And that's where the video just ends. Rather anticlimactic, but boy was it a wild ride. This has got to be the most brain-dead thing I've ever covered. Here, I thought this would be a nice break from young Earth creationism to talk about a fresh kind of pseudoscientific woo, and after this, I'm eager to get back to Genesis apologetics and friends. Oh well, if you liked this video, hit the like button and tell me what you liked in the comments. If you didn't like it, hit the dislike button and tell me why not in the comments. Either way, I hope you subscribe and use the bell icon to turn on all notifications so you're always alerted when I have new content. I'm the Dapper Dinosaur. Thanks for watching, but before you go, I just want to say a special thank you to my channel members and my patrons, especially those pledging $20 or above. Bob Knob, Work in Progress, Bent Hovend, Tapioca Weasel, Denny5252, Ian Chen, Landon Knoll, Mabbity Babbity, San, Sphincter of Doom, The Venerable Bede, Elleran Teller, Dr. Tapioca Weasel, and Pat L. Dennis. As you probably know, YouTube is a very volatile platform, and from month to month my income on the channel can swing wildly. But the people you see on screen are directly supporting so that I don't have to worry too much about that, and the channel can keep going as it is, and perhaps even improving. If you'd like to join this team, there are links below to join the channel or in the description to join the Patreon. The Patreon starts as low as $1 a month, and the channel memberships start as low as $1.99 a month. On Patreon, you can even get a discount for pledging annually. If you do decide to pledge, you'll get access to an exclusive Discord server just for channel supporters, as well as early access to all of my pre-recorded videos, often up to 2 months in advance. Higher tiers will unlock even better perks. Now, if an annual or monthly pledge isn't right for you, but you still want to support the channel, there is a merch store down in the description, as well as an Amazon wishlist, just for me. And if financial support isn't something you can or want to do, then if you still want to help out the channel, please just like and share these videos and make sure you comment on them. It really helps the channel out. Thanks again for watching.